The dust rose in slow, choking spirals beneath the boots of the crowd, turning the late afternoon sun into a dull red coin hanging low over Dry Creek. Men smelled of sweat and tobacco, women whispered behind gloved hands, and the auctioneer's voice cut through the heat like a rusted blade scraping bone. Horses snorted against their reins. Somewhere a child cried and was quickly hushed. It was the kind of day when something ugly could happen and the sky wouldn't blink. She stood on the wooden platform with her wrists free, but her future bound tight as wire. Her name was Lion Hua, and though she was only 19, her gaze held the steady burn of someone who had crossed an ocean and buried more than one dream along the way. Her black hair had come loose from its ribbon in the wind, and dust clung to the hem of her faded blue dress. She refused to bow her head. The sign beside the platform read labor contract 2 years, but the way the crowd looked at her had nothing to do with labor. $2, the auctioneer barked impatiently. $2 for the contract, strong hands, speaks some English, cooks, sews, works fields. $2. A few men laughed. One spat, worth less. Someone muttered. Lion Hua lifted her chin higher. At the edge of the crowd stood Caleb Turner, a rancher known for keeping to himself and letting his cattle speak louder than he ever did. He was broad-shouldered, sun, darkened and quiet in a way that made people uneasy. He hadn't come to buy anything. He'd come to collect a debt from a trader who never paid it. But then he'd seen her, not the dress. Not the sign, her eyes, they weren't pleading, they were furious. $2, the auctioneer repeated. Last call. Caleb didn't entirely understand why he reached into his pocket. Maybe it was the way the men grinned. Maybe it was the memory of his own sister, standing small against a world that had tried to bend her. Maybe it was something he didn't have words for. He tossed 2 silver coins into the wooden crate at the auctioneer's feet. The clink sounded louder than gunfire. Sold, the auctioneer declared. The murmurs swelled. A few men snickered. Caleb stepped forward, boots heavy against the boards. Lion Hua looked straight at him as he approached. There was no gratitude in her expression, no relief. You'll regret this, she said in careful, deliberate English. Her voice trembled with anger, not fear. I won't obey. The words struck him harder than if she had slapped him. Caleb paused at the base of the platform. Up close, he could see she was thinner than she should be. Tired, but unbroken. I didn't buy obedience, he replied quietly. I bought your contract. She stepped down from the platform on her own, brushing past him so their shoulders nearly collided. Same thing to men like you. The crowd laughed again, but Caleb didn't join them. He gestured toward his horse. You can ride or walk. Ranch is 6 miles west. I walk, she said immediately. He shrugged once and mounted his horse. They left Dry Creek under the burning red sky, one riding, one walking, neither speaking. The prairie stretched wide and empty, broken only by brittle grass and distant cattle. The wind howled low across the land, carrying the promise of colder nights ahead. Lion Hua kept her eyes forward, refusing to show fatigue even as her steps slowed. Caleb watched from the corner of his vision. After a mile, he dismounted without a word and walked beside her, leading the horse. She glanced at him sharply. Why you get down? Horse carries weight better than pride, he said. She almost smiled, but the expression vanished before it fully formed. They reached the ranch after dusk. It wasn't grand, just a weather-beaten house, a barn leaning slightly east, and fencing that needed mending. Smoke curled from the chimney. A lantern glowed faintly in the window. This is it, Caleb said. She studied the house as though measuring it for weakness. You have wife? No. Children? No. She nodded once, as if confirming something to herself. Inside, The house smelled of coffee and wood smoke. A single table stood near the hearth. A quilt lay folded over a rocking chair. It was a lonely place, but it was clean. Caleb set a plate on the table, bread, beans, salt pork. Eat. She hesitated, suspicion flashing in her eyes. I don't poison people I pay for, he muttered. That sparked a reaction. You pay $2. She shot back. Not fortune, still money. She sat slowly and began to eat, small, careful bites at first, then faster as hunger betrayed her caution. Caleb turned away, pretending not to notice. When she finished, she wiped her mouth and stood, "Where I sleep." He pointed to a narrow room off the main space. "There." She walked to the doorway, then stopped. "You think I belong to you now." "No," he said evenly. "I think you work here, same as me." She stared at him for a long moment. "I won't obey. You already said, and I mean, so do I." Days passed in brittle silence. Lion Hewer rose before dawn without being told. She hauled water from the well, hands blistering against the rope. She burned the first batch of biscuits and swore softly in Cantonese under her breath. She tried to saddle a horse and nearly got kicked. Caleb watched but did not interfere unless danger demanded it. On the third day, she found him repairing a fence post. "You do all this alone?" she asked. "Mostly." "Why?" "Because it's mine." She frowned at the word, mine. That night a storm rolled in fast from the north, black clouds swallowing the stars. Wind battered the house. Rain came sideways. In the chaos, a section of fencing gave way, and 2 calves bolted into the dark. Caleb grabbed his coat and rifle. Lion Hewer stood in the doorway. "What you do? Fix what's broken." She stepped into the rain before he could stop her. They rode hard through mud and lightning. One calf was found tangled near a ravine. The other had wandered dangerously close to a swollen creek. Lion Hewer slid from the saddle and approached the trembling animal slowly, murmuring in soft tones Caleb didn't understand. The calf stilled. She guided it back with steady hands. When they returned soaked and shaking, Caleb looked at her differently. "You didn't have to come," he said. She wrung rain from her hair. "I work here, same as you." Winter crept in with sharp teeth. Supplies ran thin. Lion Hewer began planting a small garden near the house, even though frost threatened. She built a wind barrier from scrap wood. She rationed flour carefully. She stitched tears in Caleb's coat without asking. One evening, as snow whispered against the windows, she sat by the fire staring into the flames. "In my village," she said quietly, "men decide everything. My father decide, then trader decide, then auction decide." She lifted her eyes to him. "I decide now." Caleb leaned back in his chair. "Good." She blinked. "Good. I don't need someone who obeys. I need someone who stands." Silence settled between them, softer than before. The town did not approve. Word spread fast that Caleb Turner had bought a Chinese girl for $2. Some assumed the worst. Others came to see for themselves. One afternoon, 3 men rode up uninvited, grins sharp as knives. "Heard you got yourself a bargain." One sneered. Caleb stepped onto the porch, blocking the doorway behind him. "She's under contract," he said calmly. "Contract can be transferred." Another replied, "We'll give you 5." Lion Hewer stepped outside before Caleb could stop her. "I am not horse," she said coldly. "You don't trade me." The men laughed. Caleb's voice dropped low. "Leave, or what?" The crack of his rifle cocking answered clearly enough. They left. That night Lion Hewer stared at the door long after the lantern burned low. "They come back," she said. "Maybe. You afraid?" "Yes." She studied him. "Good." Spring arrived hesitant but hopeful. The garden survived. Calves grew strong. The ranch began to look less like a lonely man's burden and more like something shared. One afternoon Caleb found Lion Hua standing on the hill overlooking the pasture, wind lifting her hair. "You still regret it?" she asked without turning. "Regret what? $2." He considered. "No." She faced him then. "I meant what I said. I won't obey. I know. And you still let me stay." He nodded once. Her eyes softened for the first time since Dry Creek. "Then maybe I don't regret either." Months later, Dry Creek held another auction. This time it was cattle. Caleb and Lion Hua rode in together, side by side. Whispers followed them, but fewer laughs. A young woman stood near the platform, fear etched across her face, a familiar sign beside her. Lion Hua's jaw tightened. Caleb looked at her. "Your decision." She dismounted slowly and walked toward the platform. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Labor contract, no." Lion Hua said firmly, "Not like this." The crowd shifted uneasily. She turned to Caleb. "We pay debt, not by person." He reached into his pocket without hesitation. The silver coins rang out again, but this time they sounded different. As the young woman stepped down, Lion Hua met her eyes. "You decide now," she said gently. The wind swept across Dry Creek, lifting dust into the bright morning air. Caleb watched her. This fierce, unbowed woman who had once stood on this same wood and declared she would not obey. She had been right. He did not regret it. And she did not belong to him. They rode back toward the wide prairie together, not owner and owned, not master and servant, but two stubborn souls who had refused to bend. Behind them, the town seemed a little smaller. Ahead of them, the land stretched open and endless, waiting for no one's permission.